Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Hilary Lindberg. I'm a clinical psychologist and sexologist, and I was wanting to have a little bit of a chat with you about my top tips and strategies for sexual well-being. So just a little bit about myself. I am one of the directors at the Centre for Relational and Sexual Wellbeing. We are a private psychology and counselling practice based in Brisbane and see people in person and via telehealth to support them for their relationship and sexual well-being. The main interest of working is those who experience painful sex or low libido and other sexual function-based concerns. And I guess when I was thinking about what are the top tips or top strategies, or really like the top things I talk with clients about who are coming to see me when they may have chronic pelvic pain or experience painful sex, the three that really came to mind were, let's rethink about what sex is and what good sex is. How we can maintain pleasure-focused masturbation to understand a little bit more about what we like and what we don't like, and also the use of mindfulness and how we can use mindfulness to enhance pleasure and through the breath and the senses. And so those are the three things that I thought I'd talk with everyone today who might be kind of tuning in. When I think about good sex, what we often have to start with is being able to really name and shine a light on the myriad of sexual myths that perpetuate in Hollywood, in pop culture, and even sometimes in like pop psych literature and resources. And we really have like Hollywood to thank for this version of unrealistic and unattainable standards of what good sex sometimes is. And when we think about that image, it's often really penetrative focused. It's often really passionate and spontaneous and orgasmic, and everyone's orgasming all at the same time when they haven't even known anyone and they don't even communicate about what they like. And this is really unrealistic and really unattainable for the everyday person to engage with. So we have this one way that sex is portrayed, and the other way, which is often when we're looking at like sex in long-term couples, it's this other kind of gender power struggle where no one's really having enjoyable sex at all. And it might be, hey, honey, do you want to have sex tonight? Oh, no, I've got a headache. And so we have these really two polarizing and unrealistic standards of what sex is, which just leaves us as the everyday person to think, oh, if I'm not doing this, then I'm not really having a good sexual life. And so we really want to be able to then think about, well, what would be a more reasonable, flexible, and evidence-based model that would help us guide what a good sex is? And I'll talk about that in a second. The other sexual myth that comes out time and time again is that when we're talking about sex, people are assuming penetrative intercourse. And I think it's really important for us to name that sex is not synonymous with intercourse, that the penis and the vagina are two body parts that have some role, but aren't the only thing that happens when we're engaging sexually with one another. When we think about actual healthy sexuality, this involves a really broad and varied ways in which physical touch and physical closeness and pleasure can be incorporated. And I really try to work with individuals and those in relationships to broaden this definition of what are we talking about when we're talking about sex. The third myth that comes up time and time again in clinic is the idea that, oh, my partner should just know when we've been together for a while now, they should just know what I like, and that I don't want to have to talk about it. That's not really sexy. And I think that's really understandable that we can have this idea and hold these views because realistically, we haven't had the education or we don't have the knowledge of how to actually talk about sex and talk about sexual pleasure because our sexual education is often not that great and it can be a little bit of a taboo topic. But I think it's important for us to shine a spotlight on the idea that it's really unrealistic to just instinctively know what each other's sexual needs are, as these can change. And if we think about, particularly when we experience chronic pelvic pain, that sometimes our pain flares can be pretty severe. And in that sense, that actually what we used to like when our pain is a little bit better managed isn't the same. And we need to be able to communicate that clearly. Likewise, across the lifespan during different life stages, regardless of health, sex and our sexual needs are going to change. When we're really busy at work or we're managing family or our health is playing up, or we are supporting elderly parents, that these things all have an impact on our sexual needs. And so to be able to discuss our feelings, our needs, and our preferences, and what we're open to and perhaps what we're not able to do at this point in time, is a really important way to facilitate good sexual experiences with our partners. I also like to just put a little note in there that when we're having these conversations, they're often best had outside the bedroom. Um, and they can be had around the dining table, on a drive, or anywhere. But it's often best to have these conversations outside the bedroom so we can take that into the bedroom when we're next connecting with our partner. Okay, so if we've talked about some of these sexual myths and some of these sexual ideas, keeping in mind there are so many more that are out there. The model that I like to use with clients is one by Barry McCarthy called the Good Enough Sex Model. And this is the aim of what we're wanting to work towards, because it would be an indication of that we're having good sex then. And the Good Enough Sex Model, the reason I really like this model is because it is flexible, it is pleasure focused, and it is accepting of the multiple meanings of sexuality. And what I'm talking about there is flexibility in this model to say, hey, my pain is really aggravated at the moment. And so what we used to do, we might not be able to do right now. That doesn't mean we can't have good sex. Or I'm really stressed at the moment. I need a little bit of support to help my desire grow. And then I can move into that space with you. We also recognize that there are so many different ways in which people engage sexually. And so the more flexible, the more broad, the more varied, it's going to allow us to have this model to carry us through life and through the different life stages and evolve with us, rather than be really prescriptive and really kind of tight around its foreplay, penetration, and then we end. And that kind of pass, fail, or really rigid view of sex doesn't actually allow us to move through the various ways in which life and health and ill health works for us. And I'm sure for those who are listening, when we experience chronic pelvic pain, that we do need to be flexible and we do need to make accommodations for. And this prescriptive model doesn't allow for those accommodations and that flexibility that we just inherently need when we're dealing with chronic pelvic pain. So the model is broken down into 4 key components. The first one is desire. And what we're talking about here is the openness to being sexual, is the accepting of body changes, the acceptance that our pain may come and go and vary, and the recognition that desire and arousal are 2 different concepts. And what I'm talking about here is desire is the psychological and physiological state of wanting to be sexual, and arousal is the psychological and physical state of being turned on. Sometimes these 2 may co-occur, and if we were to trust everything that Hollywood shows us, it would be that they only co-occur. We only kind of want and we're turned on at the same time, and oh, heaven forbid, our partners are turned on and wanting everything at the same time as well. And again, trying to make that really clear that that is not always the case, that actually sometimes we can be open to being sexual, but I might not be turned on yet. But once I start kissing or we start caressing, my arousal naturally increases. Sometimes we might also have the experience where I'm a bit turned on. Perhaps I've just watched a bitty sexy scene on a TV show, or something's popped into my mind as I'm driving home, and I'm a bit turned on, but I'm not actually open or willing to do anything with that. I'm tired as well. I've got to, it's 10:30. I've got to get to bed soon. And so whilst I might feel a little bit turned on, I don't have the desire to act on that. And I think we often see that people have the expectation or the idea that I should just want things. I should want to be as sexual as my partner. My partner's really wanting to be sexual and I'm kind of not. That must mean there's something wrong with me. And I kind of like to bust that a little bit by saying, where did we have the idea that I must want and desire the same thing to the same intensity as my partner? And I sometimes use the analogy of, if you've planned, I don't know, like steak and salad for dinner that night, and your partner comes home and says, oh God, honey, I've been really craving pizza all day. It's all I've been thinking about. I just really, really want a pepperoni pizza. Do you reckon we can order pizza in? And you'll think, yeah, I could kind of go a pizza. Yeah, that's fine with me. We'll put the steaks back in the fridge. We'll have them tomorrow. And then the pizza arrives and you start noticing your mouth salivating and you're eating and you're thinking, oh my God, this is so good. I'm so glad we ordered pizza tonight. That we have that experience, whether it's pizza or other things, repeatedly with our partner. And yet we wouldn't have the same thing when it comes to sexuality, that the same rules wouldn't apply. Because in reality, of course, the same rules apply. That I might not be wanting or not be in that same mind state or in the same intensity as my partner, but that doesn't mean I might not be able to get there. And that's what these two kind of diagrams here are about. The first one here, this pendulum, is this recognition that there are a number of contextual factors that may swing my desire more open and willing to be sexual. And there may be a number of things, contextual factors, that swing my pendulum of desire to be not open or not willing. Some of those things may be like if I've had really poor sleep, that may swing the desire closed or off more so. If my pain is relatively well managed at the moment, I haven't had too many flares and I'm not feeling too inflamed, then maybe that swings my pendulum to be more open. I'm on holidays and I'm really relaxed, maybe swing the pendulum more open. Or I've got this really big looming deadline, I'm working super late into the evening, that might swing my pendulum a bit more off. That these things move and wax and wane, and it is much more determined by the contextual factors going on in our life, in our health, and in our relationship than this idea of it just being this simple on-off switch. The other image that I've got here is one from Emily Nagoski, who I've got some resources linked to later. And she likes to talk about this same idea as this like emotional floor plan. And if we think about desire being at one end of the house, what are the emotional rooms that I might need to move through to be in a space of desire? So if I'm really angry, my partner, I've just had a fight, or I've had a really stressful day at work and I've had to really talk with some people, or I'm really anxious at the moment, my anxiety is really kind of elevated because my pain is just hard to manage right now. These rooms might not be the ones that just naturally flow into desire. I might need to do a couple of other things to get me to be more open to being desiring or being more open to be sexual. So some of it might be I need to feel like my partner and I caring about each other and we're tending to one another, because that allows me to feel more connected to my partner. And when I'm feeling more connected, oh, I notice that we're more playful. And actually that playfulness really just naturally flows into me wanting to be more touchy-feely and more open to being sexual because it feels natural to flow. This is just one example of a floor plan. And I would encourage you guys to think about for yourself the last time I really wanted to be sexual, or the last time I was open to being sexual. What was happening in the context of my life, as in these contextual factors? And what rooms was I in? What was happening in my kind of emotional landscape that allowed things to naturally flow to desire? And if you and your partner can identify those things, then the next step is about how do I make that more likely to occur? So if we think about this landscape here, for this person, it might be that actually we need to schedule more time that we connect emotionally as a couple through date nights or through sitting down and talking rather than just watching TV at the end of the day. Because when we do that, I find that we're more playful together and that allows me to feel more desire. Or how can we have more fun together so that it leads on to desire? And those contextual factors are much more likely to influence desire and therefore arousal than the idea of, okay, let's just be sexual and hope that it works. The next part of this model is pleasure, and this is really the cornerstone of the model. And what we're talking about here is this giving and receiving of pleasurable touch. And there are so many ways in which we can engage physically with one another, whether or not that leads to arousal or orgasm. That is not the aim here. Orgasm is not the aim. The aim is give and receive pleasurable touch. And if that moves to things that are likely to lead to orgasm, then that's great, but it's not necessary. Because if I'm engaging in pleasurable touch, we're going to feel more connected, we're going to feel more pleasure. And the resource that I like to use with clients to help kind of understand this concept a little bit more is the sexual buffet. This is something that's been downloaded from our website. And it's not an extensive list by any means, but I think it can really demonstrate that there is so much more than just intercourse, and that each one of these experiences are whole and pleasurable in and of itself without the need for it to transition to something else. And I think if we're engaging in sexual activity with the idea that kissing needs to lead to something else, and that needs to lead to something else, and that needs to lead to something else, then if, for instance, we're experiencing pain or certain activities like penetrative intercourse, let's say, results in pain and kissing has always led there, well, then it's any wonder that we don't want to do kissing anymore. Whereas if we level out all of these activities, that they are all equal and that they are all valuable and that they are all whole in and of themselves, then kissing can just be kissing and we can enjoy that. Showering together and kind of washing each other's body and caressing each other in the shower can be enjoyable in just that. Massage can be enjoyable in just that. And of occasion, these things, showering, may naturally lead to touching one another, which may naturally lead to bringing out some toys and masturbating one another. But it doesn't need to. Showering in a sensual way, where we're washing each other's body, we're not just like, oh, I think I need to shave my pits. Can we do that together? That's not sensual. Showering together in a sensual way is a whole moment in and of itself. And what we find is that when couples are engaging in these activities more frequently, without the expectation that it leads to something else, is that we're enjoying that more because we're physically connecting with one another more, compared to, oh God, it's our anniversary. And so, God, we better do something. And then the pressure is high, the expectation is high, the satisfaction often is low, and it's often disappointing, rather than let's just kiss for kissing's sake and how nice that was. The buffet kind of metaphor that I use for this is like if I go to a buffet and one dish isn't available, like penetration, let's say, I'm just not going to not eat at the dinner. No, instead, I'm going to be loading my plate up with a number of other things at the buffet and probably get some bread to mop up the sauce at the end. And that's going to be enjoyable. And so, really thinking about for yourself what is on your sexual buffet that is available for you at the moment. If you and your partner haven't been sexual for a while, or pain has been really difficult to manage right now, you may not have many things on this buffet. It may be kissing, it may be showering, it may be some massage. And that's maybe where we start. And that's wonderful that you've got some of those moments. And then as perhaps pain is being able to be a little bit more managed, or we're experiencing sexual pleasure in this new good enough model, then we can start to add other things because we experience these moments as sensual and pleasurable. And so our desire can sometimes build then for more moments. Some of these things on here, people may never want to do, and that's fine. But it's a really good tool to sit down with your partner to say, where are we at the moment? These are the things that I'd be open to. These are the things I'm not open to at the moment. And it starts that communication about if we're to initiate, we're initiating one of these things. The next part of the model is eroticism. And what we're talking about here really is that intense feeling or energy. It's that building of arousal that can naturally flow on from pleasurable touch. Eroticism can sometimes be this kind of like dance that we build on one another, where I'm a bit turned on and me being turned on turns you on, me seeing you turned on turns me on, and we kind of can piggyback off our arousal together. Other times it might be that you're just going to attend to me and lavish me in all my arousal and give me all of the pleasure. And then we might take turns and I might do the same back to you, perhaps in that same moment or in another moment. Eroticism can sometimes also incorporate things like a bit of kink or pornography or toys, but it doesn't necessarily need to. And I think eroticism has had a bit of a bad rap to just be associated with that. When actually at the core, eroticism is about a really strong foundation of trust and respect, where I feel safe enough to suggest things to my partner, and my partner can feel safe enough to say yes or no back. And that really we're just turning that energy up a little bit. It's just a little bit more active and a little bit more arousing than perhaps some of the more sensual ways of touch that we might have talked about earlier. And I think we can have the idea that it needs to be kinky, and that's the most erotic way. but actually people who have really vanilla sexual lives can also be incredibly erotic and incredibly arousing. And so there is no one way that is better than the other. It's just going to be different depending on each person and each couple and where they're at. And at the core, we're just like exploring and having those intense feelings and energy that is a little bit more activating than perhaps some of the sensual touch. The last part of the model is satisfaction. And here what we're talking about is at the end of the experience that I am satisfied, we as a relationship are satisfied, and we're feeling a little bit more connected after the experience. What helps promote satisfaction is having, like we've spoken about before, a flexible and varied way of being sexual, where it doesn't matter what ended up happening as long as it was pleasurable, rather than this, oh, did we do intercourse? Did we both come? Or we didn't, or we failed. That wasn't a satisfying experience. If we have that pass-fail test, it's going to put a lot of pressure on ourselves and it's going to put a lot of pressure on the satisfaction. Whereas, did we feel good? Did we give and receive pleasure? Did we feel closer as a result of that? Great. That is the aim. And if we have that satisfaction, it is much more likely to reinforce desire and become this self-perpetuating experience when we drop expectation, we drop demands, and we drop a rigid view of what good sex is. And I think when I talk through this good enough sex model, what I like to also reflect on is that at no point there did we talk about that good sex needs to have X, Y, or Z. Because what one couple or one person might need is going to be very different to another couple and to another couple and to another couple. And so there is no one size fits all. And it's about each couple coming together and talking about where are we at? What are we needing? What are our needs? What makes us feel good? And how do we fit that into our no doubt very busy lives that we're all leading at the moment, let alone if we have full-time work or kids or other kind of commitments, health appointments, etc. on top of that. Life can get busy and we need to be able to have a flexible way of engaging with each other that isn't so rigid. And that's why I think this model is a really good one for us to kind of take away the Hollywood views and to come into something that's much more supportive for us throughout the lifespan of a relationship. Okay, so if we take that model and now we apply that same model to the next kind of two tips that I want to talk about. The first one being masturbation, or the next one I should say, being masturbation and pleasure. With masturbation, sometimes I might kind of prescribe that to someone when they don't really know what makes them feel good anymore, or what used to make them feel good doesn't feel good anymore, or it's not really something that they've ever understood. And at the heart of what masturbation homework is about is learning to listen to your body and learn to listen about ways that you can experience pleasure, because that is going to be vital if you want to be able to reach climax, and it's also going to be vital to be able to communicate to any current or future partners. If, let's say, the idea of masturbation brings up some ick factor for you, sometimes that can be touching, the idea of touching your vulva or touching your vagina is has like a disgust element to it, or there's worry about pain, or there is tabooness and kind of shame around that. That can be a common experience. And if that comes up for you and it's hard to work through that, then I would really encourage you to go speak to a therapist around that, so that you can work through those things to be able to really give yourself permission to experience pleasure. When I'm talking about masturbation with clients, I really want to emphasize that masturbation is not about fingers and toys going directly to the clitoris. So sometimes, and earlier in my career, when I'd say, oh, go home and do some masturbation, and people would say, oh, it just wasn't really working. And when we started to unpack how come it wasn't working, it was because they were going home, getting their vibrator out and just putting it straight on their clitoris. That's so much more than just clitoral stimulation or vaginal stimulation. And I'll give you a little bit of step-by-step on how to do that in a second. The other thing I really want to emphasize is that masturbation is not about the quickest way to reach climax. If you're focusing on like, what is the fastest way I can get there to make me come, what we're likely to do is put pressure on ourselves, and they're not particularly sexy, arousing thoughts, and we can actually spook the orgasm. To be fair though, once you've gotten to know your body a little bit and what feels good, you may be able to have a little quickie on your own. But if that is not something that you are familiar with, or you're really kind of early in days of exploring self-pleasure, then we need to come back to, let's just first engage with ourselves in ways that feel good, and orgasm will naturally flow on from that once you've gotten to know it. We don't just get in a car and automatically know how to drive a manual. The same, we don't just start touching our body and automatically know how to bring ourselves to climax. So if we can just have a moment to pause and reflect on what are the contextual factors again that help your mind to move into being more open to engaging with yourself. So if you've had a really stressful day, or there is lots going on for you, perhaps you need to think about, what do I need to do to help me get into a mind state to be more open to being engaging with one's own self-pleasure. And again, those are some of the things I mentioned earlier, that if there is a bit of ick, if there is a bit of disgust, if there is a bit of aversion to touching oneself because of shame, because of fear of germs, because of pain, then that would really be worthwhile talking to someone about to help work through that. This might be how I typically set up masturbation with a client of mine. Again, the aim is to experience pleasure. Pleasure, 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 pleasure. That is the only aim. First step is we want to be able to feel relaxed. Pardon me. We want to be able to feel relaxed. So if you've just come home straight from work, you think, oh, Hilary said to do that masturbation homework, I better get upstairs and do it. No, that is probably not going to set you up to experience pleasure. What needs to happen for you to feel relaxed so you can connect with your mind and connect with your body? Sometimes that might be having a hot bath, having a shower, doing a guided relaxation exercise, just slowing down and doing some deep breathing first. Whatever you do to relax, let's do that first. The next step that we want to focus on is starting to build arousal in the mind, because this is where it starts. The mind is so powerful, it can turn on and off arousal very easily. So let's first get aroused in the mind, because that'll naturally trickle down to the body. For some people, it might be reading erotica, audio erotica. There's some wonderful apps that you can download, or audio recordings of erotica. You might want to read erotica. You might want to spend some time in fantasy. So it might be previous times that you've really enjoyed sexual activities and playing that in your mind. It might be fantasies about future experiences, or fantasies about other people, time, places, fan fiction, things like that. You might enjoy watching pornography. So there's a myriad of ways in which you can build arousal in your mind, recognizing that fantasy and what happens in your mind, you are in 100% control of that. And just because we're fantasizing about something doesn't mean we want it in real life. The next part, once our mind's a bit engaged and we're kind of starting to feel a little bit turned on, we want to start engaging with the body. Do not go straight for your genitals. We first want to build the sensual experience in the mind. So that might be, I start rubbing some really nice cream on my arms or my legs, or I might start, might start caressing your breasts, or playing around with your neck, or just stroking your body in soft touch or hard touch, or whatever it might be. Just start engaging with the body. And then being able to tune in on where your body would like the touch to go. So it might be, where am I leaning into? Where am I pulling away from? Just exploring your body in its vast ways. And if something feels good, let's stay there a little bit longer. Explore that spot a little bit more. Do you like it faster, harder, softer, slower? What's the rhythm like? And really help build that arousing experience whilst keeping that active in the mind. If you are to use toys, again, don't go straight for the clitoris. Explore the vulva a little bit. Same with your hands. So if we're thinking about, like, if this is the clitoris and like the vulva lips kind of down the side of my hand here, that we might start with the toy and kind of really rub around the whole vulva. You might push the toy up against your vulva. You might allow the toy to run in up your thighs, over your vulva, and up the other thighs, to kind of tease yourself a little bit. You might start in big circles around the clitoris and then circle your way in. You might start with massaging on the top of your mons, or kind of taking it down inner, closer to the inner labia, or even kind of at the entrance of the vagina. And as you do that, you'll listen to your body more and more about what feels good, what you'd like, what's your body responding to. The other thing that is also really key is let's get some good lube on board. If you have a physio, your physio will be able to recommend some great lube. Woolworths, Coles, kind of supermarket lube is not the best. So really invest in some good lube. It's going to make the experience so much more enjoyable. The other thing, if you don't know how to touch your genitals, or you're just kind of thinking, God, I need some more, I'm someone who needs step-by-step instructions on how to do this, the website omgyes.com is a great resource. It's like a glossary of different masturbation techniques and different ways to engage with yourself. It is explicit in that it will be real women, real vulvas demonstrating techniques, but it is very educational rather than kind of erotic. So if you are someone who likes step-by-step instructions to be able to engage in masturbation, then OMG Yes would be a fantastic resource. Try and watch that away from the masturbation exercise, where you can jump online, look at the different techniques, and then bring those techniques to your bedroom. Because like I said, it's very educational. It's not very kind of sexy. The third tip is around mindfulness to enhance pleasure. There is research upon research upon research about how mindfulness improves sexual desire. It improves the experience of arousal and orgasm and sexual satisfaction. We know time and time again that mindfulness helps increase our mood, reduce depression, and reduce anxiety experiences, and reduce distress. The more present we are and the more engaged we are in the moment, can just better our mood and our mental health overall. We also know that for those who perhaps experience more dissociative symptoms, which can be quite common when we experience chronic pelvic pain, to kind of just dissociate from our body a little bit as a way of coping, that mindfulness can help us reconnect with our body to experience pleasure and to understand what our body is sending us cues for. Because really, mindfulness allows us to integrate the body and mind to have that sexual response that we can be attuned to. And so when I'm talking about a really simple technique for mindfulness around pleasure, it's incorporating the breath and the senses. So with breathing, your psychologist, sorry, one second. Your psychologist may have given you some instructions on how to do nice relaxed breathing to help manage anxiety. And that is great. When we're talking about mindfulness with sexuality and pleasure, we're not really wanting to do the breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, because that's like a relaxation state. We're wanting to activate the arousal system, and the breath work is just a little bit different. If you think about the last time you were really aroused, what was your breathing like? I can imagine it's not this kind of calm, rest and digest breath. For some people, when it's hard to kind of stop and engage with their breath, you might be able to connect in with your partner's breath. So how is your partner breathing, and how can I breathe with them so that we're doing that together? And that can also be connecting and mindful to kind of connect with that moment and connect with them. The other way in which we can enhance pleasure through mindfulness is to engage with our senses. And so here what we're talking about is like touch. Can I focus in on the sense of touch to what do I want to touch? Where do I want to touch my partner or my body that makes me feel good? Or if my partner is touching me and my mind has drifted off, how can I bring my mind back to the experience of where my partner is touching me at the moment that feels good? If it doesn't, can I give some instructions to make it feel good and really come back to the experience of being touched and what that is like? Or how can I go to touch my partner or touch me and focus in on that sensation? For some people, it might be, oh, I want to touch my partner. I want to run my fingers through my partner's hair because I love the way that feels. Or I want to kind of just touch my arm or touch my neck because I love that kind of caressing touch. That helps me get back in with my pleasure. Great, let's do that. The same with sight. What can I look at that reconnects me back to something that is arousing and erotic? So for some people, like, I want to look into my partner's eyes because they've got such beautiful eyes, or I want to see my partner so turned on, and oh my God, look how turned on they are. I'm really liking that. That's now turning me on to see them so turned on. Or I might re-look back at the erotic book that I'm reading and focus back in on that, or look at the pornography that I'm watching. with hearing. What am I hearing that connects me back to feeling aroused and feeling turned on? It might be hearing my partner moan, or my partner's breath, or hearing like our skin rubbing together, or hearing what's happening in the pornography, or hearing even the audiobook that I'm listening, really tuning back into that. Smell and taste again. What am I smelling that is particularly kind of arousing? Perhaps it's the smell of the lubricant, or the smell of my partner's sweat, or the smell of our bodies just together. Again, taste. If I'm kissing my partner, or if I'm eating things, what are the tastes there that help me reconnect back to this is an erotic experience and I'm liking this? Again, not all of these senses are going to be things that particularly turn you on, but if you'll find one or more that can help you reconnect back with your body and what it's feeling, and pair that with breath work, whether that is I'm going to regulate my breathing with my partner, or I'm just going to try and breathe in that erotic way again, then that is going to help enhance that experience of pleasure rather than kind of staying with our mind where it might be going. In terms of some resources, Emily Nagoski is a great author and a great sex educator. She's written a book, Come As You Are, and then Come Together, about long-term relationships. That OMG Yes, Better Sex Through Mindfulness. And we also have a number of blogs and resources on our website that talks through the good enough sex model, that talks through pleasure, and the difference of desire and arousal, and a number of things that I've spoken about today. So I'd really recommend anyone jumping on there if they want to read more, or take some of that stuff to their partner to have a read about. But that's all for me. So thank you very much.